Heads of Conference, the 44th regular meeting at the CARICOM Heads of Conference meeting in the Bahamas last week, returning on Saturday night. As the country is aware and as everyone is aware, unfortunately, the Honourable Prime Minister wasn't feeling too well, had some flu-like symptoms, and tested, as he is very cautious, and tested positive for COVID this morning. He has just completed chairing this week's weekly cabinet meeting just a short while ago, and he asked Minister Brown and myself to attend this week's post-cabinet press conference to update you all on what has been taking place and some additional information coming out of last week's activities and bringing us up to today. So I'd like to start by, first of all, wishing the Prime Minister a speedy recovery. He will also be participating in tomorrow's parliamentary proceedings, answering the promised Prime Minister's questions. He will do so virtually. And I'd like to start by inviting Minister Brown to update us on the information that he has for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleague Minister Young. I want to wish a very pleasant good afternoon to each and every one of you. I see some senior members of the media are present, and also to the members of the viewing and listening public, particularly citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I bring you greetings. So, as members of the public would be aware, the Prime Minister led a delegation to the Bahamas very recently. This was for the 44th regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of CARICOM. And the day before that Heads of Government meeting began, we had this 17th special meeting of COFCO. COFCO is the Committee on Foreign and Community Relations of CARICOM. So these meetings spanned from the 15th to the 17th of February. On the first day, which was the 15th, well, let me start by indicating the members of the Prime Minister's delegation. Of course, it was led by Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley. I was present as Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. Minister Stuart Young was also present as Minister of Energy and Energy Industries and Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister. The delegation also comprised or included Her Excellency Jennifer Marchand, the Ambassador of Trinidad and Tobago to CARICOM. The Chief of Protocol was also present, a Senior Foreign Service Officer, and two members of the Special Branch, as well as the Deputy Press Secretary. This delegation was supported from headquarters here in Trinidad and Tobago by a team of our senior diplomats who prepared briefings and furnished additional information during the course of the meeting. So I propose, ladies and gentlemen, to give a brief breakdown of the engagements that this delegation embarked upon during our time in the Bahamas. The first day was the 15th of February. This was the 17th special meeting of the Council for Foreign and Community Relations, COFCO. Trinidad and Tobago is represented on COFCO by myself as Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. And this is a body comprising all the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the Caribbean community. And generally, we gather on a regular basis to prepare the agenda and all details for the Heads of Government Conference, as well as to look at particular matters and developments relevant to the foreign affairs of the Caribbean community. So during that day on the 15th of February, COFCO had engagements with the Republic of Korea, otherwise known as South Korea, with Azerbaijan, with the Food and Agriculture Organization, with the United Arab Emirates. The UAE had a ministerial level delegation present, also with the European Union, and finally with St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The engagement of COFCO with St. Vincent and the Grenadines was with regard to that country's assumption of the pro tempore presidency of CELAC. As you know, St. Vincent and the Grenadines in January of this year became the president of CELAC, And this is the first time a CARICOM nation has held the leadership position of this very important hemispheric body, CELAC. On the 15th as well, there was a special luncheon hosted by the United States government to introduce their candidate for the post of Director General of the IOM, the International Organization for Migration. And Trinidad and Tobago also participated in that luncheon and engaged with the candidate by the name of Dr. Amy Pope, a very strong candidate being fielded by the government of the United States of America. On the 15th as well, there was a dialogue between COFCOR and the United States of America. The U.S. sent a very strong delegation to this particular meeting in the Bahamas. It was led by, well, I would say co-led by John Kerry, who is the United States Presidential Envoy on Climate Change, as well as Assistant Secretary of State Brian Nichols, and Special Presidential Advisor for the Americas, former Senator Chris Dodd, who has become very close to us in Trinidad and Tobago and is a good friend of Prime Minister Rowley. During that engagement between COFCO and the U.S. government, a number of thematic issues were examined, including access to financing, food security, and energy security. And during the component on energy security, Minister Young joined us and gave some comments and led an engagement on the part of COFCO. We then proceeded to the opening ceremony of the 44th regular meeting of the Conference of Heads, attended by the Prime Minister. I would say that the most important part of the formal opening ceremony was the bestowal of a special CARICOM Triennial Award for Women, which was conferred upon Dame Janet Bostwick, who is a Bahamian citizen of great acclaim and who has done tremendous work and advocacy and action to bring parity to the status of women and girls in the Bahamas as well as across the Caribbean community. That brings us to day 2, which was the 16th of February 2023. That day was mainly comprised of a plenary session involving all CARICOM heads of government and their delegations. There was examination of our food systems agenda, or agri-food systems agenda. There was examination of progress with the CARICOM single market and economy, a very important issue for us as well as the region. There was a presentation on COVID-19 by CARFA, Dr. Joy St. John, and there was some good news there in terms of the region's ongoing resilience to some of the effects of COVID-19. There was some good news for heads in that regard. Of course, we are aware that COVID continues to pose a threat to our region and even to our country and to members of the government as well as citizens. On the 16th as well, there was a special engagement with the Honorable Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, who joined the heads meeting as a special guest, and there was interaction between heads and Prime Minister Trudeau. That interaction went into a caucus meeting where the heads plus one, which usually is the foreign minister, sat in caucus and were joined by Prime Minister Trudeau for an intense focus on the Republic of Haiti. During that period, of course, it was caucus, so I am not able to go into the details of the discussion, but there were presentations, analysis, and discussion on the current situation in Haiti and recommendations as to additional steps that the hemisphere, the international community, and the Caribbean community in particular can play in that regard. I will give you some details shortly on the outcome of those caucus discussions. The plenary was also addressed on day 3 which was the 17th of February, the final day, by the President of Ukraine, and that has been extensively ventilated in the media, President Zelensky's address. Heads were also addressed by the President of the Afrexim Bank and the Director General of the World Trade Organization. And then we went back into caucus on the final evening for a presentation by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Suriname, given the dramatic and unfortunate developments that were unfolding in that country, even as heads of government were meeting. The other thing I would want to make special reference of is the focus on security. Again, a number of heads of government, including Prime Minister Rowley, but certainly not limited to Prime Minister Rowley, made robust interventions during caucus and during the plenary on this issue of crime, violence, and the treatment of violence as a public health concern within the Caribbean community. The observations were ubiquitous across the region: the easy access to high-powered weapons, the challenges both at the level of the judiciary, at the level of the police service in many jurisdictions to assist governments in coming to terms, coming to grip and bringing down the level of violent crime that we have been experiencing. A number of decisions were made after these discussions, the most important of which for us at this stage is a decision that Trinidad and Tobago will host a special symposium on crime as a public health concern in April 2023. The supporting entities for this symposium would be the Council for National Security and Law Enforcement, CONSLE, regional body, and another one, which is COSHOD, the Council for Human and Social Development. So these two regional entities will be meeting in preparation for our hosting of a special symposium in April on the consideration of crime as a public health concern. And the RSS, the Regional Security System, as well as CARICOM Impacts, will be providing reporting and support and analysis that would feed into our special symposium. So I would just want to end by providing some specific details on Haiti and then a reference to some of the bilaterals that our delegation engaged with on a formal basis. So a key decision made by our heads of government in the Bahamas was the decision to launch a special mission to Haiti to have preliminary meetings with a number of key stakeholders. Trinidad and Tobago will participate in this special mission to Haiti, which is scheduled for the 27th of February, in a few days' time. This special team will be staged in the Bahamas and then will be conveyed from the Bahamas to Haiti by the Bahamian Defense Force. Trinidad and Tobago will be represented on this special mission by His Excellency Dennis Moses, who's familiar to many of us, who is TNT's High Commissioner for Trinidad and Tobago to Canada. He's quite fluent in French and has had some experience with Haitian stakeholders. We will also be represented by a senior member of the Defense Force. So Prime Minister has made the determination to carefully select High Commissioner Moses to represent our country as part of this regional team. This team will also be fortified by representatives of the Government of Canada. So it's a Canada CARICOM consortium, special mission going into Haiti, having meetings focused on security planning, with key stakeholders within Haiti, as well as engaging in stakeholder consultations with civil society, as well as members of the Haitian National Police Force. It is very likely that on the conclusion of that special mission on the 27th of February, there will be further interactions. Heads discuss the likelihood of another meeting to be hosted in Jamaica subsequently, where stakeholders from Haiti, in the broadest sense, would be brought to Jamaica for some conversations in a different environment. But we are taking the first step at this time. Trinidad and Tobago has seized its responsibility to a fellow member state of the Caribbean community. We are participating fully in this special mission and will continue to provide support to this regional effort to treat with the situation in Haiti as soon as possible. Again, this was the outcome of the discussions that took place in the Bahamas among heads of government and with Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada. And finally, I just want to give a sense of some of the bilaterals very briefly that our delegation engaged with on an official basis. One was with China. China was represented in the Bahamas during the heads conference by Mr. Kai Wei, Director General of their Department of Latin American and Caribbean Affairs, and he had a bilateral engagement with us, myself, as well as the ambassador to CARICOM and some other officials. The focus really was on a very important anniversary which takes place this year, which is the 10th anniversary of the Belt and Road Initiative, and some very promising developments that are occurring with respect to the Phoenix Park Industrial Estate. So that was that discussion. There was a subsequent bilateral meeting. Our delegation was led by Prime Minister Rowley to that bilateral, and that was an engagement with the Republic of Korea, between TNT and the Republic of Korea. The Korean delegation was led by their Minister of Office for Government Policy Coordination, Moon Kyu-bai. That took place on the 17th of February, and a number of areas were discussed, including the prospect for a very important collaboration on maritime and energy-related projects. The other bilateral I just want to mention very quickly is one between Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister Rowley and Senator Dodd. The focus of that bilateral meeting was the relations between the United States of America and Trinidad and Tobago, and there were extensive and wide-ranging discussions that also treated with some regional and hemispheric affairs. So, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, members of the public, we wanted to take this opportunity very transparently to share some of the insights and highlights of the time the Prime Minister and his delegation spent in the Bahamas, the engagements that were undertaken with within CARICOM and also with some of our key external partners. At this stage, I would now turn back over to my cabinet colleague, Minister Young, and of course would be open to questions should any arise. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Brown. Of course, at the start of last week, the Prime Minister led a small delegation, myself and some others, basically support staff, to the International Energy Conference in Guyana. There were a lot of significant developments coming out of the Energy Conference in Guyana, and in particular, the Prime Minister's participation as one of the feature speakers on the day that the Energy Conference opened. The Prime Minister followed after some other leaders who were invited spoke, in particular, Prime Minister Ralph Gonzalez actually spoke after him, and the President Irfan Ali, President of Guyana, spoke after as well. The Prime Minister's speech, which he provided and which has been reported, focused on a number of important issues in the energy sector. As you all are aware, a lot is going on in the energy sector. From day one in 2015, the Prime Minister has spent a lot of time and energy out of the office of the Prime Minister in guiding the development of this country's energy sectors, and now in taking a leading role in the development of the regional energy conversations that are taking place. Some of the messaging that relayed from the Prime Minister's feature address were that we needed to collaborate more as a region because there was a lot more potential for us, and in particular significant hydrocarbon finds that are being exploited in Guyana, the potential in Suriname, and then there's always the potential, as we understand it, from seismic work that has been done in Barbados and Grenada. The Prime Minister also took the opportunity to basically talk about the prevalence of renewables, but more so about that we must not let the pressure be put on us by some of the more developed countries who, as soon as they were in crisis, turned to the utilization of the worst fossil fuel, that is coal. So we put that down once again, and that is a conversation that Trinidad and Tobago has been leading in globally in the past year. Allow developing countries to develop their hydrocarbon resources, oil and gas, because these are the types of resources that can be done through the technology that's available now in a proper, efficient, and responsible manner. We also discussed the issues related to climate change. But our call, which I then echoed later on that evening when I participated in a panel on regional collaboration in the energy sector, is that we have the strength in the region to really become one of the super forces in the world of hydrocarbons, that is oil and gas, and we are prepared to lead from the forefront in collaboration with our neighbors and our partners. It is noteworthy that one of the messages that the Prime Minister also used this opportunity, understand that the energy conference in Ghana, similar to Trinidad and Tobago, is an international platform. You had participants there from many of the multinational oil and gas companies across the world, including important service industries players who are from outside of our region. So you're participating here with an opportunity to speak to some of the energy leaders globally, and it is not limited alone to the region. The Prime Minister again reintroduced that we have a refinery here that is currently being preserved and available for opportunity. I've seen a lot of commentary come out of that as people believe that was focused on an offer solely for Guyana. Of course, the offer was not only for Guyana. We recognize that in a room like this, and you have a platform with many energy players, and I can tell you, as the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, we have been continuously receiving a number of interested proposals for our refinery. Of course, we had made the offer to the government of Guyana in part of our collaboration. We were very aware prior to the Prime Minister making the announcement in that hall that Guyana has its own plans, and we stand ready, as we reinforce with them, to assist them in the development of their own hydrocarbon economy and sector in Guyana. So we have received, and in fact when I was walking the floor later that day, the conference hall, a number of interested persons coming up to discuss the potential of utilizing the refinery. The refinery is available. You need a supply of crude, and you need to know from an engineering point of view what is necessary to get it restarted and working forward. We then left, as I said a short while ago, very early that following morning to fly up to the Bahamas. When we got to the Bahamas, I, as Minister Brown referred to a short while ago, immediately left the airport and joined Minister Brown and the other foreign affairs ministers in the CARICOM region to engage this high-powered U.S. delegation. Historical context, coming out of the Summit of the Americas, where, as you're all aware, the heads of CARICOM made a very good stand in our engagement at the highest levels with the United States government, President Biden and Vice President Harris. A number of committees were formed, and we have seen the United States re-energize and reinvigorate their relationship with CARICOM. There were 3 important committees that were formed. President Biden gave the instructions for them to be led by Vice President Harris. One on food security, one on energy security, and one on the financial services sector. Vice President Harris co-chairs these with other members of US government, these three bodies. Dr. Rowley is the lead for the CARICOM region on energy security. President Irfan Ali is the lead on food security. Prime Minister Mia Mottley on the financial services sector. As part of Prime Minister Rowley's responsibilities in the continued engagement on energy, on the energy sector and energy security, I was appointed his co-chair to deal with the United States government, and in turn, Vice President Harris appointed Mr. Amos Hochstein, who is the senior advisor for energy security at United States State Department and someone we've been engaged with throughout. I was required to attend this meeting that Dr. Brown spoke about a short while ago and to provide an update and to engage with the team that, as he said, was being led by Ambassador Brian Nichols from the State Department, Special Envoys John Kerry and Senator Dodd. And it was a very robust engagement. And basically the message coming out of that is, whilst the region is ready and we're prepared to engage, in particular on the basis of renewables, because a lot of our fellow CARICOM islands have difficulties with energy security. They're still using old technology. How do they get the fuels? The price of fuel goes up, etc. But we needed to have a bit more than conversation and a bit more than talk, and they needed to really engage in getting projects done. So that will continue. It was a good engagement that continued thereafter. I had further follow-up meetings with one of the representatives from the State Department who's from the Energy Bureau, and then in fact in a few weeks' time I'll be going to Houston for a week, where again the United States government has requested to engage with me out of that Energy Bureau and other factors. So that is what happened with the start of the meetings. Also, what went on during that time is a number of other meetings to really progress Trinidad and Tobago and the region's need for energy security. And these are ongoing conversations. I can tell you that there's a lot of work that is taking place in the energy sector, including this morning, because very often you all say that you don't hear it from my mouth. This morning I returned from my second visit to Venezuela since we've been provided with the OFAC license to proceed with the development of the Dragon field. As you are aware, a few weeks ago, I was in Venezuela, in Caracas, engaging in conversations, negotiations, and discussions. I returned this morning just before joining the tail end of the cabinet meeting this morning, and that is going to continue. I can tell you, without getting into any details at this stage because it's premature, that I will hopefully be leading a team and a delegation of experts and technical persons in 3 weeks' time, the second week of March, back to Caracas for us to continue those conversations and negotiations that are set on the right pathway for us to be able to jointly develop the Dragon gas field and hopefully bring that gas to production in Trinidad and Tobago as well as in Venezuela. These are some of the things that are taking place. The Prime Minister plays an instrumental role, and he wanted me to just give you an update on what were the conversations that had taken place in the Bahamas and in particular in Guyana as we progress and we continue to not only protect but to grow the region's energy plays on a global scale and level. And at that stage, I think it is appropriate for me to stop now and to invite any questions you all may have for either Minister Brown or myself. Jules?
So just wondering, Minister, in the context
Jules, like you lost your voice in Carnival, speak up.
in the context of the energy discussions, and in terms of renewables, for example, what would you say in terms of the regional approach? We know, for example, in Trinidad and Tobago, the issue of the solar park, the announcement of a wind farm, but in terms of the regional approach, where is that going?
That's an excellent question, and part of what I've been spending time on. There are 3 jurisdictions in the region that have the land size as well as the population size to pursue renewable projects off of the bat. Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, and Trinidad and Tobago. Our concern, and one of the things I've really been pushing with this energy security committee that was formed under the chairmanship of Dr. Rowley and Vice President Harris, is how do we engage the rest of the region? How do we engage projects that, as we say, may not be bankable on a typical scale for the rest of the region, some of the smaller islands. And I'm pushing them really, and I think there is interest in can we look at, with some of our smaller CARICOM neighbors, development of certain projects and then cross-island the power supply. So therefore what you're doing really is you're pooling the respective resources of population so they can pay for it, but then also you may be able to do thermal in one island and you may be able to do solar in another, wind, and as separate jurisdictions, not cross the hurdle of bankability. So I'm trying to progress those conversations to benefit the CARICOM region, and we're actually picking up some traction. So that is how we're looking at developing it and providing energy security. Also another plank of the conversation, and in particular this is where we're calling upon Guyana and Suriname and even the available resources in Venezuela with Trinidad and Tobago. If there's that collaboration, we can utilize the gas and we can produce LNG, for example. So you have some of the other jurisdictions looking at can they use LNG for regasification to supply their own power grids, as well as provide ammonia, methanol, which we know are some of the cleaner sources of carrying clean energy and green energy. So these are the conversations, and I'm really pushing for us to move beyond conversations into projects. And I have to say, it has been picking up momentum, which is why I'm going to re-engage with the energy experts out of the U.S. State Department in a couple of weeks in Houston.
You mentioned the refinery minister. If I'm not mistaken, Guyana has plans for a refinery of its own.
Correct.
Does that pose a particular challenge for the state, for the refinery in Point-à-Pierre, in terms of getting someone to lease or to sell, for the state to sell it, in light of the fact that you may have a competing refinery in Guyana?
Absolutely not. From what I have seen so far, the Guyanese refinery and what they're looking to build, and understand there's always a lead time from discussions, from projects, to be able to actually construct and to get it going. They are looking at a smaller refinery, smaller size refinery. Ours can process about 150, 140,000 barrels of oil a day. They're not looking at something that large to start with. I mean, good luck to them. Refineries all over the world, you have some that are being brought back up, some that are being brought down. It is a difficult business, but what Guyana has is they have a steady supply of crude, and I suspect they will do the necessary negotiations to bring some of that crude home. I don't see it at all affecting Trinidad and Tobago and the ability for someone to come in with the right proposal to restart the refinery in Trinidad and Tobago. As I said, even at the conference, I had a number of serious persons come up to express interest. But what I've done is we've set up a TPHL, a body of experts that are supposed to process these proposals, so send it into them, and then the process of processing it to see if any are really realistic.
I follow up on that. Keishan Haynes, Guardian Media. You touched on it earlier. You said people are always coming up. What exactly would it take for the government to look up and say, hey, yes, I will accept this?
The formula is a simple one, as far as I'm concerned as the Minister of Energy. One, any serious prospect has to have a ready supply of crude. But then also they have to be prepared to undertake an analysis from an engineering point of view of the refinery. Remember, it's been put in a preservation state since late 2018. What work from an engineering point of view needs to be done to the refinery to be able to activate it and to utilize it? So those are the types of things that you're looking at. A lot of people may have ideas, visions, dreams, but until you see that they're serious and they engage in particular on those 2 points, they will have a supply of crude, but more importantly, from my perspective, they will undergo the engineering work to restart it safely, with, of course, a cost element that they will bear. That is what will get you across the hurdle.
Can I follow up on your Venezuela trips? I didn't even know you had gone the second time, but there were some issues President Maduro had raised, especially related to payments and how they would get money out of that. Have those fears been allayed?
It was interesting to see how there was an interpretation of what President Maduro said. And as the Prime Minister did point out in one of his previous speaking engagements, President Maduro did not single out Trinidad and Tobago at all. We have been in contact, constant contact with the President Maduro government at the highest levels, including with the president himself. And as I said a short while ago, I can't get into the details at this stage. As soon as we have the details, I'll be able to provide them, provided the confidentiality agreements, because that was part of my discussions yesterday. That there must be the signing of confidentiality agreements, as you would expect. But I don't see there being an issue. There are always ways for us to proceed, and the conversations in particular. I had one meeting just before I left Caracas this morning to come back to Trinidad and Tobago that was very, very encouraging, and I think we've paved the way forward to be able to satisfy Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago.
Could I add to Keishan Singh, the thing with the timeline, because 2 years is, as you know, in the energy business is quite a short window. If we're getting people to have to invest in infrastructure, kind of Exxon and so on. So even
what you're talking about? You're talking about on
Dragon,
right.
to get Dragon to get
Exxon is not involved in Dragon. Eh?
Sorry, Shell. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up with Guyana. Sorry about that. Shell. But to get, I'm worried about the timeline. Like, if you have just the two, because I mean, you don't have to answer this, but but the bottom line is that all of this has come about because of the Ukraine situation. It would appear that we're getting the Venezuelan government is obviously getting a blight because it's seen as, I mean, that's a geopolitics. Right. But so what we want to find out is if President Putin pulled out tomorrow from Ukraine, said, look, forget that, and people are going to, you want companies and governments to invest in the infrastructure to build the Dragon field, 2 years is really not enough.
All right, I think you're mixing up and jumbling up a number of different concepts. So let me try to untangle some of it. Let's start with the President Putin, i.e. Russia, pulling out of Ukraine and that crisis coming to hopefully a halt or at least a slowdown. That will not affect us and what we're doing with Dragon whatsoever. You would recall that way before there was a Russia-Ukraine crisis, we had pursued the development of the Dragon field. 2018, we had negotiated a term sheet. We have a commercial term sheet, so that doesn't stop Trinidad and Tobago's development. Now, with respect to the 2-year OFAC license, the OFAC do not grant waivers or licenses for more than 2 years. So that is the longest that they will grant a license for obvious reasons, because it is really a waiver from sanctions. We are in continuous conversation with U.S. Treasury and in particular OFAC, and we don't see that as an issue. In fact, in the conversation that I had with the United States government officials on the morning that they were going to announce the grant of the OFAC license, this was one of the main discussion points between us. And we are entitled to apply for renewals, etc. And they said, do not worry, because this is the longest we can grant. We see that you've applied for 10-year, and whilst we're prepared to consider, unfortunately, the OFAC doesn't grant for longer than 2 years. We have been in a partnership, for example, with Shell on the development of Dragon for quite a long time. We know the situation in Trinidad and Tobago and the benefits this can provide. So no, the 2-year expiration on the OFAC license is not affecting whatsoever our progress. It is premature to give any timeline. I'm certainly not going to give you any timeline at this stage as to when that gas will come to market. What I can say is up to the point in 2018, significant amounts of work were done to be able to progress this. And in fact, when I went back and re-engaged all our technical notes, etc., that gas was to come to market in 2020. All right, so that gives you a good idea of the time frame. The gas would already have been produced by 2020 if we didn't have the imposition of a further level of sanctions.
The government seems almost giddy with excitement about this deal. Are there any concerns?
I don't know who in the government you're seeing giddy with excitement.
Prime Minister was excited. But are there any concerns really going into this that the government has right now? And are there any requests, anything being asked of us that we are not too sure about at this stage in the negotiations?
Let me just try and bring back some context. The government consistently works especially in the energy sector, very often we are doing a lot of work that the public is not aware of and cannot be aware of. Cast your mind back to last year. No one knew with any level of certainty what the frequency of trips up to the United States government in Washington, D.C. were about. In particular, we kept very, very quiet because we knew what we were working on, said as much as we could. If the government has expressed some level of happiness with respect to us being granted that OFAC waiver, I think that is well placed, because when you look at it with respect to Venezuela, the only other entities that were granted such OFAC license was Chevron, and so far I've heard talk of maybe E&I, Repsol on the way there, etc. So for us to have achieved that, and the level of diplomacy, the level of engagement at the highest possible levels that had been taking place, unbeknownst to everyone, working. I mean, I myself made about 6 or 8 trips there during the course of last year, to be able to at least achieve an OFAC license that opens the door. Up to that point, no one thought it was possible. We were constantly being criticized, constantly being told, oh, where's Dragon gone, etc. So we will continue in the same stead. We will continue. I certainly will, and I know the Prime Minister will, because he's the taskmaster, and we'll just continue working and understand this is for the benefit of Trinidad and Tobago. If you know the energy sector, any gas that comes to market in Trinidad and Tobago is for the benefit of the people.
But the question was, are there any concerns right now in terms of the negotiations? So, because we understand
No. The answer is
nothing we're
no.
worried about, nothing that's being asked of us that we're maybe not prepared to give.
No, the answer is no. I can tell you, I mean, we have been negotiating significant energy deals since 2016. You keep seeing the track record. You keep seeing the boxes being ticked. The PSC of Manatee, the restructuring of Atlantic LNG, getting the solar projects across the line. We have restructured, we have negotiated a number of energy deals out of the Ministry of Energy and NGC. So we're accustomed to facing sophisticated persons on the other side in difficult situations, and we've always come out on the better end for Trinidad and Tobago.
Don't mind. In terms of the issue of fuel supply, the pricing system as it presently is, and the international prices and so on, would the government be doing, let's say for the mid-year review of the budget, a review of the existing prices at the fuel pump for gasoline and diesel, and whether there will be an adjustment depending on the international price on the market?
Excellent question. First of all, I am not going to take God out of my mind and try and preempt the Minister of Finance in his mid-year review. What I can tell you is that the Minister of Finance and myself are in constant discussion as we monitor fuel prices. The government had promised that if fuel prices go down, the benefits would be felt at the pump, and we're constantly calculating and seeing how it evens out. So I can tell you that is under active consideration, looking at the fuel prices as they go down. I mean, literally almost on a daily basis, and sometimes many times during the day, the Minister of Finance and myself, and often the Prime Minister, are engaged in look at the price of fuels, look at the price of oil, look at the price of gas. And to go back to a point that Kijan made a short while ago as we wrap up, one of the things of course you could ask. So one of the things we successfully negotiated on our price of gas, as I've said before, is a basket price of gas. So where you're seeing Henry Hub go down to certain lows right now, fortunately we are still getting the benefit of that basket indice by getting some Asian, some European pricing on our gas, etc. So these are some of the things we've done. But to answer your question directly, Jewel, it is under constant consideration, and the Minister of Finance in discussion, we will take those decisions.
One of my colleagues earlier spoke about the concerns about payment. How is Trinidad going to pay Venezuela if cash payments are prohibited by the US? And I didn't quite get a clarity.
Well, I didn't get into any discussion at all as to how that is going. What I've said is we are in active discussions with Venezuela. I've already made 2 trips to Caracas, meeting with the highest level there. So yesterday again, it was engagements with Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, the Minister of Energy there, Minister Tariq El Al-Sami, as well as the President of PDVSA Gas as well. and we are having the conversations as to how this thing can be structured.
For Dr. Brown, I wanted some more information on the symposium. Which countries are being invited to engage in discussions? And specifically, I want to know if the U.S. is being invited, because we keep talking about the guns that are coming in, and the U.S. is clearly the manufacturer of these guns. Are they being invited to these talks to show what their guns have done to the region? To talk to them directly?
Thank you very much. What I can tell you is that the entire community, the Caribbean community, all heads have been invited to the special symposium. In terms of external partners, United States of America being one potential stakeholder, and there are many others, including some from South America, that determination has not yet been identified. But certainly the thematic area you've referenced, the flow of guns from North America and elsewhere into the region, has been already the subject of detailed scrutiny, and that examination will continue. In fact, the Bahamas has been one of the strongest voices on this issue, given their very close geographic proximity to the United States of America, and a number of very alarming and disturbing cases where they have told us that they've actually traced the guns to a purchase and an export in a barrel or some other mechanism, and the challenges they've experienced in terms of getting the bureaucratic connections made and the type of collaboration that would really help us to make a dent in this pattern. But the key point I want to make as a follow-up to your question is that we're not in this alone. I know sometimes the readership here might feel that we're the only ones besieged by a very serious violent crime epidemic. It is right across the region, and it was quite riveting that even some of the smaller islands, the OECS countries, their prime ministers, their leadership have been pleading for more of a regional response to this violent crime scenario, and welcomed the call by the Prime Minister and the invitation to participate. So I anticipate, Trinidad and Tobago anticipates that we will have a comprehensive participation in this symposium, and I think it's also important for the public to be more fully engaged in this concept of crime, violent crime as a public health threat, and to identify some of the responses that can match that as well on a regional level.
Is there anything tangible that you're hoping for, and not just let this be another talk shop, as people will say these symposia tend to be?
Well, there's a lot. The reason that we would be hosting this is for tangible outcomes. One of them is the realization that the national security apparatus in our country and in the region is just one element of what has to be much more of a multi-stakeholder comprehensive response. And so coming out of this focus in April, we anticipate that both domestically here and right across the region, we will be able to mobilize many more important stakeholders, including, of course, the private sector, to participate more fully in the suppression of this threat, which we are seeing with alarming homicide rates across the region. What I can tell you, it will take place in April, and the Prime Minister is giving some consideration to the specifics.
Us just yet? Any estimate, security and all of that?
No.
Final question from me. Jamaica was mulling the idea of sending troops into Haiti as part of their security plan. Are we mulling that as well?
I would say, with all due respect, that the issue of troops and boots on the ground at this stage is a little bit premature. What heads have been very clear about in discussion, let me make the point that Prime Minister Henry, interim Prime Minister Henry of Haiti, was present in the Bahamas, was part of the caucus discussions, was part of the interactions at plenary with Prime Minister Trudeau and colleague heads of government of the region. So what the region is clear on is that the solution to the Haitian crisis has to be Haitian-led. And therefore, those of us who from the periphery might be calling for troops to go in and so on, it's a little bit premature for us to get to that stage. That is one of the areas that will be discussed during these stakeholder consultations. And we'd see where those discussions go. It really would be to get the government of Haiti, as it currently stands, the National Police Service of Haiti, the opposition elements and other key stakeholders to the table and analyze what would be the most prudent next steps for support to restore legitimacy and to prepare the Haitian society for free and fair elections in the soonest possible time.
Just wondering, Minister, given the, as you had said, the conversation with the leaders of CARICOM in terms of South Korea, you also have China's relationship with North Korea, you also have Russia's relationship with Ukraine, and you had that presentation from the Ukraine president. In terms of the geopolitics of it all, is that a difficult balancing act for small island states like Trinidad and Tobago and the other members of CARICOM in light of the strong relationship with the United States?
Well, certainly I can speak for Trinidad and Tobago. We find our anchor in the principles that guide our foreign policy, and these have been very clearly elaborated and expressed at the level of the United Nations, at the level of the Organization of American States, at CELAC, and every other forum where we are represented. So Trinidad and Tobago is not shifting with the wind on these matters. We have very clear guidance and leadership from the Prime Minister, and we also find comfort in the strength of our diplomatic team at home and abroad. Combined, we've been able to make the right decisions. We found ourselves on the right side of the UN resolutions and all the other statements and determinations related to this issue. So I think your question opens the prospect of a really nice discussion. But for a small island state like Trinidad and Tobago, what we've found, and it's the Prime Minister who gave me this guidance very early on in my term, and that is when you stand on principle, history tends to, your decisions stand the test of time. And so while it may seem a very challenging geopolitical environment, Trinidad and Tobago has been able to maintain a firm footprint and has engendered the respect and regard of partners across the board, because we don't just shift based on convenience, but we are anchored by our principles. So when it comes to the war in the invasion of Ukraine, our position is crystal clear, and it has been expressed consistently. It's not identical to the positions of other countries, but we have our own specific nuance. But we have been part of a broad coalition that has expressed the need for this war to come to an end in the soonest possible time. We've called for the withdrawal of Russian forces from within the borders of Ukraine, and we've called for an end to the humanitarian crisis, which is not limited to that country, but even affects us in the CARICOM region as well. And as you yourself have stated, in all of this, we have maintained excellent relations with other players in the global sphere. The Chinese are very close friends, and we collaborate on an ongoing basis. The European Union, the Canadians, and of course the United States of America. That's the environment we have to work in, and we're doing so responsibly.
Question for Minister Young. There's an update on, do you have an update on the working group, the establishment of a working group with Guyana to deal with energy issues?
The working group with Guyana was approved by Cabinet a few weeks ago, which came out pursuant to an MOU that was signed, I think, just over a year ago. So that is now in place, and it is going to be led by our ambassador in Guyana, Conrad Enil. I have also been engaged with the Minister of Energy as well as President Irfan Ali. Sean, I think you had...
I mean, as we're kind of coming to the tail end,
We are coming to the tail end. This is the last question.
Remiss of us, without going into all the nitty-gritty, but Carnival. Carnival has... I mean,
Carnival or Carnival?
Okay. Yes. Social, artistic, touristic, and economic aspects, benefits, and so on. So just like a general, without which tribe get lost here and this and that, but, you know, any sort of basic mood in cabinet that you would have had on this thing, because I mean, people are, you know, people say, some will say good, some will say bad, but
Carnival is a time for the people of Trinidad and Tobago and those who come to participate and to enjoy it, by all accounts. And dealing with that huge mass of people that assemble in those types of environments, I think it was an overall success. And I will leave it up to the relevant stakeholders at the appropriate times to make the necessary comments that they must. But at this stage is behind us, and we continue to move on. I think Dr. Brown wants to add something.
Let me just give the reporter a little bit more in terms of, from the Ministry of Foreign and the CARICOM Affairs. We were very pleased to see a very broad participation by the diplomatic corps and the consular corps, but I want to focus on the diplomatic corps here in Port-of-Spain. There was enthusiastic participation by missions based here in Port-of-Spain in, well, the build-up to Carnival itself, as well as Juve, and on both Carnival Monday and Tuesday. I was very, very pleased to see a number of high-profile and some not so high-profile heads of mission, ambassadors, high commissioners, foreign service officers and diplomats based here, engaging with our citizenry and having a safe and enjoyable carnival. I was very heartened by that, and I think it's a good sign for the future. Maybe at some point we'll have a diplomat's band at some stage. It's an idea to think, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all very much for participating in this week's post-cabinet media conference, and do be safe. Thank you.